I consider Stephanie like a major success story of this entire effort because, you know, before the summit event last year, when we had the panel discussion, Stephanie knew zero about angel investing. And when she and I had the conversation, like, she's one of the people that helped me to realize, like, not everybody knows about this. Like, people who should know and people who are in, who could be participating, you know, don't know. She was one of the people who opened my eyes to that. And so, you know, and she said, oh yeah, I think it would be interesting to have that at the summit event. And then, you know, Gina and I had been talking about that. And, you know, so there were a handful of people, and then having it, so to go from that to this year, she's on all these calls, putting together presentations and, you know, kind of little Miss Angel. You know, it also shows how it's just a matter of getting into it. If you get into it, you start like getting that bug of like, you want to know more about deals, and you're actively looking at things differently and looking for deals.
Right, and comparing them. And so she's been really engaged. It's, I really loved it. I mean, this is going to be this is how you start a movement, because, you know, it took us, and look, BC last year, 2% went to women and 0.002 went to women of color, you know, like, I mean, it's so bad, the thing we're conquering. So in 15 years, we've moved the angel. You know, this is a really tough thing that we are all addressing, you know.
But I think what was interesting for me, actually, as I was like looking just for some new data to include, in looking at the amount of capital like that, where, you know, capital comes from to start businesses, and where you look at like banks, there's so much emphasis on like loans and bank money. And that was way down on the end versus, you know, the money that comes from individuals, essentially. You know, first your personal savings, again, that's most of it. But then, you know, the angel world, the friend and family money, especially, like, to me, that was another aha moment when I looked at that graph, that chart, and to see, oh my gosh, like personal savings and then friends and family, like, it's no wonder we don't have capital. Like, these are the things that are mostly what's funding businesses. And we spend so much time talking about, you know, kind of in general, people spend so much time talking about banks, which was like such actually a small part of it.
Right.
And even VC, you know, still relatively small when you talk about the whole funding landscape.
Yeah, and that's the thing that really speaks to me so much, is that a lot of us don't have the capital to invest in others or in ourselves. And those of us who do either don't know about it, or maybe can't take the risk, or whatever those things are. A lot of it is about education for some of those who can. But so to me, that's the crux of the matter, is how can we bring in more of those people who can? Because without that, this is a losing battle, generation after generation.
Yeah, one of the things Larry pointed out too, Peggy, to the points you were making about like the rights and knowing if it's, you know, the difference between an and an or in that sentence is, you know, he said that, again, that's something he hasn't really paid attention to. So he had a, you know, real life situation where that kind of thing happened.
So have we, many. So we've learned from it, we think, but we still make mistakes once in a while. You know, I could tell because he asked the question, how do you avoid getting crushed? And I wish now, and maybe I can work it in next time, because in a way I had a couple afterthoughts. One was, I wish I'd said, well, at least if somebody else is coming in to invest, the company's raising capital and you will be diluted. You know, you do get cut by dilution. So that you have to expect, you know, but I could tell he'd had some experience with the dark side of angel investing, because.
Yeah, no, and Larry is a prime candidate to actually join an angel group or to be part of the LLC structure that Stephanie has been talking about.
Yeah.
He's a prime candidate for that. You know, a little more time on his hands. He has his firm, but you know, he's quasi-retired, sort of like in the way that Stephanie is.
I think that we really need some I'm totally with you, Gina, but I will tell you this too, that we have that it's better, you know, for white women, but it's still a huge problem.
Mm-hmm.
And what I like to say, I say to Joseph, really what we do at Golden Seeds is we make it comfortable for rich white men to invest in these women.
Mm-hmm.
I know, you know, ultimately they write bigger checks than most. We have a few women that are becoming whales these days, you know, like it's kind of evolving, but for the most part, our women write smaller checks. We earned less, you know, we earned 70% of the guy sitting next to us.
Mm-hmm.
And women of color, it's 50%. I mean, it's so horrible.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's two layers, maybe, you know, maybe we're a little better off, but it's about making the deals fundable
Mm-hmm.
by the people that actually have the capital and the power right now. But I also feel like, I mean, we need some kind of policy, I think, that the accredited definition needs to be expanded or redefined. I mean, I don't want people to make investments that are too risky or that they can't really afford, but you know, these maybe I mean, the crowdfunding platforms, everyone knows what I think about them, but I also understand, like, what the hell else are people going to do, you know?
So that will be an interesting conversation, actually. So next week, we do have the panel with the angel groups, you know, people from different angel groups. But then we also have the panel from alternative investing, you know, and I think it will be very interesting to hear the perspective of Republic, which they call themselves actually crowd investing, not crowd funding. And so, you know, to think about it a little bit differently. So let me tell you all a couple of things that have happened even since Tuesday. So one, you know, NJEDA is, you know, still kind of having that RFP or RFI actually that they did. You know, and they're scheduling calls now about angel groups, their interest in doing some sort of angel group. So now I think, you know, we have a little bit more information, even just based on this session. But Stephanie and I had a conversation afterward where, you know, we're really trying to move people to action, right? Like we keep talking about that, moving people to action. And what is that action? And just on that call, there were people who, you know, some are still going to be in the thinking about like, this is good, it was informative, but there are others who I think will be ready for action if we can help to lead them to what the right action is that's like comfortable based on their specific criteria. And even the people who were thinking, I mean, look, if again, you know, there are crowdfunding things like say through I Fund Women and someone can put in $100. I think that even the people who are thinking and not thinking of themselves as investors, so to speak, that's still being an investor, even putting in your $100 to a, you know, you're helping to fund, you're playing a role in the capital ecosystem. So if we can create what the paths are. So, you know, you have again, the angel groups, join an angel group if that's where you are. If it is, I want to be involved in an angel group, but I can't do it kind of on my own. And I you know, will participate in an LLC structure, which is what Stephanie really wants to get people involved in. You know, you can do that. If it is join an investment club, the way that Gina, you know, you've talked about, get involved in an investment club. And, you know, all these things are at different levels of financial commitment. There are different levels of just time and energy spent. If it's not an investment club, again, if it's a crowd investing platform or a crowd funding type platform, and we have some of our entrepreneurs that are going through those things, we can let the community know, hey, so-and-so is doing a raise on Mainvest. Someone's doing a raise on I Fund Women. Here's a deal that, Gina's investment club is looking at, and they're taking in members for the club. So it's still giving people pathways to actually get involved and do. And so on the heels of that thinking and, what we observed, I think I mentioned everyone before, we had applied for a grant from JP Morgan Chase in the beginning of the year. We had the conversation last year, and then the beginning of the year, more in-depth conversation, and they said, okay, send us a proposal. Like, we're sufficiently interested to submit a proposal. And then, of course, COVID broke out, and I was kind of like, okay, well, this was based on doing our events, and where she wanted to focus was in New York, and to get that right. And not focus on national and doing events all over, but just really focusing on the New York market. And so I figured, no live events, so kind of put that on hold, but we were also doing this other stuff. So she contacted me last week and said, hey, can we do a catch up? And I sort of figured it might be well, our priorities have changed and we're just focusing on COVID stuff, and, we're not going to be able to move forward conversation. And it was actually the opposite, that they are interested in moving forward and had, questions about, so how would we do this in this other environment, in this new environment? I said, well, funny you should say that, because we just had an online, our first online training. We haven't done the awareness event, and that's a little easier because that's not quite designed to be quite as interactive, and we can have on more people in more of an informational type format. But this was the piece that, could it work, and will people feel connected, to the points that you were raising early on, Gina, with the format. And so we wanted to test to see how that would work. And, I said from the first session, which was really the very content heavy session, it seemed to go well, and people stayed with it, and they seemed to, be very engaged. So, we have 2 more sessions, but, we got off to a good start with that. And that would be the piece of it that was that actual training and then next step. And what she and I talked about, because at first, she said, well, if you're not doing live events, maybe you can roll the budget back a little bit. And I was like, whoa, no. Can't do that. Don't want to do that. But what I said was,
and plus, what are you saving? You're saving some snacks.
Well, the cost of a venue, I guess.
Well, but you know what? We were getting the venues.
You're getting it for free.
Hosted. Hosted. So that wasn't even really. So that was one of the things that I said. And I'm actually going to go back to her. I want to look at what I had actually in the budget, but I may even ask about increasing it, because what I said to her was that we had this conversation about these different tracks. So not just, we encourage you to join an angel group at some point. And, we had talked about kind of having this group that was co-investing alongside of angel groups and things like that. And maybe some of the money could be used to create the LLC structure that would enable this co-investment. But in this scenario, what I said is that if we can help to subsidize or at least support the infrastructure of some of these vehicles. So even let's again take, because I really am trying to push this, the investment club concept, right? That we could help to support the, and even with a staff resource that we might hire, to help get that investment club set up. And she said, oh, okay, well then if the other person, if it's setting up an investment club for a person, then they would own it. And I said, well, you know, we could think about that. I said, but really what I'm more interested in is that we are creating the structure. So it's like a template. So we're helping, you know, someone here in New Jersey set up an investment club, and then someone in California says they want to set up an investment club, and we help, you know, we have the template, we have the package because we've already, you know, essentially done the work, and it becomes very turnkey. So that actually reduces the cost and just the overall friction of getting some of these vehicles set up that get people.
Which I think should be very compelling to a bank like JP Morgan, like any of the big bulge banks.
But she liked that.
Yeah, because they all are trying to figure out how to be more helpful in the space. But to your point, they're not set up to do that type of investing or lending. So the question is, how can we get close enough to the wheel? And everybody's done their own version of it. Goldman Sachs has their 10,000 Small Business Initiative. Morgan Stanley has picked every year, I don't know, 8 to 10 companies that they follow, and they'll take them through a boot camp, and they'll take them through an incubator and let them sort of see the various parts of the firm. But at the end of it, how many of these companies are they actually funding? Very, very, very few of them, if any, right, on any given year. So, but I think they are trying to be more intentional. I don't know if you know that very recently, I think it was announced yesterday, JP Morgan hired a very senior level Black man, I don't know his name, to be their head of like diversity initiatives all throughout the firm. And apparently Jamie Dimon actually hunted this man down and handpicked him and really courted him for a while, really wanted him. Again, I didn't get the name, but that they are looking to sort of double down on the efforts that they've already, they're definitely ahead of the curve in terms of this space and trying to be more purposeful around Black business owners. So I think it's perfectly timed to try to give them an opportunity, again, where they're not actually we're not looking for them to fund companies directly, but how do you help to set up the ecosystem that can?
Right, right. And, you know, it's also about getting individual capital involved, you know, individuals and activating them. And, you know, again, in looking at that one chart, that's where most of the money is coming from. It's just not coming from those segments in the Black community because we don't have it. And the people who do have it haven't really been activated in that way. And so, you know, I think, again, this is, and the
another thing, just to kind of, sorry, Jill, but before I forget, another thing that you might want to focus on in the pitch is, heretofore, a lot of the banks feel like they've been trying to address that by funding CDFIs.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But CDFIs are mostly, almost all of them are only providing loans, not equity. So
exactly. Well, so that was what I was just going to say, is that even by getting more of the individual, the capital that's controlled by individuals off the sideline and into the game, it actually potentially unlocks more dollars from the CDFIs and from the banks, because these businesses would then have the equity component that they actually need. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really good. And what's interesting is that they just hired a woman into the Pathways, the Advancing Black Pathways program, who's working under Sekou. And I knew her before, and actually I had just reconnected with her just before the summit, and she was trying to make it out. And she was saying, I'm working on this new opportunity, you know, I'll let you know. And as it turns out, she ended up at JP Morgan Chase. So she just got one of their advisors involved. So on day 3, we're going to have a panel conversation with the you know, wealth advisors about this concept of managing your wealth professionally, or, you know, using professionals to help you grow your wealth and create you know, the wealth, and to make sure that you're investing, you know, responsibly, or, you know, what financial capacity do you have? Because some people may have more financial capacity than they even think they do. Thank you. I mean, this is an amazing group, and so many of you are amazing connectors that have brought someone, or, you know, and to make this all happen. So it's a great group. And I'm going to turn over to Stephanie in just a minute, but I also want to make sure that Melissa introduces herself. So many of you speak with her and she emails you, but she's the glue that makes a lot of stuff happen. So Melissa, please introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa Parker. I am the Success Circles Program Coordinator at Eiffel, and that's just who I am. So that's it. Talk to you guys later.
Melissa didn't say she also has a company where she makes the beautiful head wrap that she has, and she makes masks and things like that. So she does great small business work as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. Just to, you know, do a quick run through of recap of what we talked about last week, and, you know, would love to hear some of the thoughts that people have come up with about their investment criteria. So Stephanie.
Great. Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm so happy that so many of you were able to come back and join us for day 2 of this 3-part session, where we're really just trying to connect people, give them the information that they need to begin to be impactful in the space. And if you'll recall, last week, we really touched upon a couple of key themes. First of all, we wanted to understand the investment process in its totality, and then focusing on 2 specific questions, which is how do we find potential investment opportunities? And once we find them, how do we evaluate them? And we spent some time talking about that in great detail, in terms of what your potential sources might be, whether it's friends and family, accelerators or incubators, angels, angel groups, or VCs. And most importantly, Women of Color Connecting as a source through its Success Circles program. And then once you've been able to source transactions, you have to go through a process of evaluating them. And what we highlighted through our study of the HBS technical note was that venture capitalists who often provide additional capital to transactions after angel investors tend to look for several key factors. Overall size of the market is a factor that they think is very important. The management team is important and instrumental in their decision. The feasibility of the business model is also important, as well as the existence of a competitive advantage. And when you couple those factors with other issues which we'll discuss or can be discussed in future training around valuation and exits, you come to get a picture of what it is that could be a viable investment opportunity. So now we've sort of figured out how to find deals. We've gotten an overview on how to analyze deals. And for me, one of the most important things to sort of cement this process is really beginning to understand what types of deals I want to be involved with. And I told Jill that when I was preparing that portion of the presentation last week, that I personally learned so much. And it's ironic because, as some of you already know, as Peggy and Loretta know, I've already invested in a deal. And I didn't know half as much about investing in transactions as I know now. And so I think that in retrospect, one of the things that I would have most benefited from was the discipline of at least thinking about what my investment criteria are. And that is why I suggested to Jill that this is something it's important for us to have a conversation around. And so if you all will recall, we mentioned or gave a couple of examples of potential investment criteria from various organizations. And then I provided a summary of what those criteria or those various aspects could be. And so I wanted to know whether or not anyone wanted to raise their hand to talk about their investment criteria. Lynn is raising her hand. How wonderful, because I can share mine as well. But I didn't want to start with mine.
Well, I already shared mine a little bit, but you know, one thing that wasn't on your list, Stephanie, that I've found when you're making direct investments is sort of what's your dollar cap, both on a single investment, and then how do you think about your investments in early stage companies as a percentage of your other investable assets, which I think is important that it's risk capital. So, I try to look at the percentage of my investments in early stage companies versus others and keep it, to the percentage I've set in my mind as being the cap. And I also do that really on individual investments as well, which is sort of become an issue now with a lot of companies coming back and asking for more money during this crisis.
Yeah. Lynn, I completely agree with you. And I think we struggled with what information to include because it's pretty packed as it is. And I didn't want to overwhelm people, but in day 3, part of the segment is going to focus on financial management, and that is part of the discussion during that session. So I completely agree with you in terms of looking at, overall, what is your portfolio? How much capital do you have? What percentage of that capital do you want to allocate to this asset class or this strategy? And then from there, how much into each transaction. So spot on. Anyone else want to bravely provide any insights on there? Otherwise, I can sort of talk about what I have come up with thus far. And I say thus far because I think that developing one's investment criteria is an evolutionary process. So for me, I started with just those things that I felt strongly about. And it's evolved as I've been presented with opportunities with which to judge my level of interest. So for instance, industry is one of the criteria that you might want to consider. And for me, I have seen a number of health medical device companies presented through my affiliation with Golden Seeds and HBS Angels. And I have gravitated in some regard to that. But in addition, I have a personal interest in technologies that innovate around the area of clean tech or energy. And so those are areas where I also have a sincere interest in learning more or possibly investing. So industry, for me right now, is really focused on health and energy tech. Another area is around management team and or composition. And as we've really been discussing here, there's a huge need for capital to flow to minority-led firms. And so obviously that is a key criterion that I am considering when looking at potential investment opportunities going forward. Third is geographic location. I have actually seen several deals that have been overseas, but for now, my interest is solely domestic. And that's something that I think is within my realm of understanding and comprehending. So for me, that's been relatively important. Stage of product development. And that to me is very important. So I've seen several companies now that are either in prototype, particularly for medical device companies. And I do not think that that suits my investment profile today. And I believe part of the reason is there's a tremendous amount of risk associated with developing a prototype or bringing a product to the position where it can be assessed by the market. there's already so much risk associated with investing in startups that the idea of even taking on the risk that the product doesn't get developed is one that I don't want to really pursue. And then finally, in terms of revenue, is the company pre-revenue, post-revenue? And for me, in order to minimize the risk, I've been really focused on post-revenue. So those are really the criteria that I have focused on to date. And hopefully that helps you get a sense for what you might consider as you begin to draft your own investment criteria.